Hey, everyone. Welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. I have a great guest on today. She's a UX researcher based in New York City, and she currently works as a UX research manager on material design at Google and organizes Ladies That UX New York City. Her work focuses on the emergent role of AI in UX design and software development. Please join me in welcoming Clara Kliman-Silver. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
You're ready for 20 questions.
I am ready for 20 questions. Yes.
Great. Question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
So, professionally, I am a UX researcher. I have been working in UX for about 12 years now, I think. And I've done design, I've done strategy, I've done research. And a lot of my work, as you mentioned, focuses on the role of AI in design. But I'm also very interested in how do we think about success? How do we measure what we do? And how do we work with enterprise populations in particular?
Great. And just a note for the audience, if you guys are interested in the big 2025 episodes, please check out our episode with Kareem Rashid. Question two. What's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
So I don't know that this necessarily makes me different, but I'm very interested in enterprise UX. I've spent my entire career, for the most part, working with enterprise populations. So first in healthcare, and then later in software development, design, really looking at how do designers, developers, other, maybe you call them knowledge workers, think about product development and using technology to help them get something done. A lot of the contexts within I work are when people are using the technology to do their job. And what I think makes us different is that a lot of the time, the people who are using the technology and the products in question aren't necessarily the ones who picked them. So if you work for a corporation, chances are somebody else decided what software you're using all day. But as a UX professional, your job is still to make sure that the people who are using your products are able to use them, that they're getting something out of it, that they work the way that is expected, that they trust them, etc. And I think that's markedly different than consumer UX, where often the focus is on delight and marketing and really making sure that somebody continues to choose to use your product. So I think that tension's really, really interesting, and especially when you're thinking about spaces like healthcare, where there's so much writing on the technology and the technology really being able to harness the expertise of the medical professionals or the patients who are showing up and using these tools.
Great. So question three. Why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
So this was not what I thought I would do when I grew up. Um, I went to undergrad to study linguistics. I was very interested in the structure and the history and development of language. And then at some point early on, I was lucky enough to get a job in a research lab where we were studying how young children acquire second languages. And that made me very curious about how do we design experiments? How do you study human behavior? So from there, I started looking more into the field of cognitive science and then computer science. So how do people make decisions? How do they think? How do they learn languages? How do they perceive things in the world around them? How do you work with large data sets? What can you model using technology and sort of AI in one form or another? And over time, I learned about UX and then felt that I was most motivated by building things that could solve problems that people had.
Hmm.
And that's certainly not to say that you can't do that in science and in academia, because that's really the heart of it. But I think I wanted to work on something that I could see out in the world and point to and say I helped with that. Um, so that's what got me into UX, and I've enjoyed it. I've had the privilege of working at a bunch of different companies in a number of different domains, and that's why I still do it today.
Great. So some people struggle with number four, and the question is, what does your future look like?
That is a good question. I I continue to be excited about what I do. I think that I see myself working in UX and technology in some form for as long as I can. I think that I continue to be really motivated by trying to solve problems that people have with sort of either basic things around them or things that are very much part of their daily lives. So some of the problems that I've seen in the past that have intrigued me are things like how do you help people sign up for government benefits, or how do you build software that help people like get medical treatment more quickly, um, and then of course things that are just helping them do their job. I remember when I was living in California for a long time and during COVID, and I had an elderly relative who was signing up for the vaccine, um, and she is not super technologically proficient, and she really struggled with like the UX of just being able to sign up. And eventually the page timed out because she didn't understand that there was above and below the fold. And luckily she was able to get vaccinated and she's doing fine. But it was this huge like moment for me where I was like, wow, a lot of the software out there that people rely on is really not usable. It's not set up for them. Like, how can we fix that? So in the future, I would love to be able to be part of something solving those problems.
Great. So five we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
So in a way, I think it doesn't. I mean, that's maybe a little bit of a dodging the question, but I I work on technology that I think really assumes that people can be anywhere with a computer or with an internet connection in order to use it. So I'm often thinking about problems that are maybe unrelated to the places within which our like my end users are working. And I think that's fine. I mean, certainly, like we are living in an increasingly portable world. We've seen over many years, but especially the last 5 or so, that workplaces have become more and more distributed and people can be anywhere um, doing many kinds of work. However, I remember from my time in certainly in healthcare, but also in some of the work that I did early on when I was in developer spaces, often the place in which you're working is sometimes much more important than the tools that you're using. So I think studying the context in which people actually show up and use technology is just as important as understanding how people use that technology in the first place. So one concrete example, I worked at a healthcare company doing like building tools for doctors and nurses and other medical professionals. And one of the tools that I worked on was for scheduling appointments. And one day I went on what we call the site visit, where you go out and visit a client and sort of see how things are going. And I was in an office that I think was mainly a pediatrics facility. So there are lots of young children who were sick and their parents, and the waiting room where the receptionist who was using the software that we were working on was chaotic. I mean, there were lots of things going on and lots of anxiety and stress and screaming children. And I just remember thinking, like, how does the person who's using this software focus? And how can we make sure that the software that we build doesn't create additional distractions for them when they're in this environment that's already fairly, I don't know, fairly involved and there's a lot to pay attention to. So that's to say that even though we're maybe in a world now where place is less relevant than it might have been at various points in the past, I do think that it continues to matter, particularly when you're designing for stuff that's supposed to be used in particular locations or in particular contexts.
Great. So six, you're starting from the beginning. What advice do you give your former younger self?
I wish that I had spent more time exploring. I think that I was, for a number of reasons, I was at a point in my life when I started out, like first in undergrad when I was working in the lab, and then later on when I started working in UX, where I really needed to take the first reasonable opportunity that came my way. And I still stand by that, and I don't have any regrets about that. But I think that it's okay to take a step back every so often and say, is this the particular application of the thing that I'm doing that is most interesting to me? Do I want to try something else? What other opportunities might speak to me that might not be directly in alignment with what I'm doing right now, and what are the risks and benefits of taking those leaps? So I think just being a bit more adventurous, and I think really taking the time to consider what's out there while not getting too off track.
Great. And seven, what's a day in your life like?
So my day varies quite a bit, but I would say in general, it's it's probably part people and part reading, reading and thinking about data. So I'm a manager. I manage a team of six. I also have a number of cross-functional counterparts that I work with on a daily basis, so designers, engineers, product managers, and so on. And I spend a lot of time talking with my team, learning from them, talking to my peers, learning from them as well. And I enjoy that. I really am in this job because I like to work with people. I'm, but I also spend a lot of time looking at what other people have done, whether it's a research project or a strategy document, contributing to those. Sometimes I get to do my own research. Often it's like surveys or sort of big analyses, but a lot of it is a balance between talking to people and then really diving deep into the data, whether it's my own or something I'm reviewing.
Great. So eight is about lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
I don't know. So I don't know really what it means to be up to date in a field like this one, especially right now when it feels like there are new things coming in all the time.
Mhm.
A great piece of advice that I got recently was don't try to be on top of all of it because there's just too much. And this was specifically in like the AI for design space, but I think that that certainly applies to many parts of the UX world. Um, I try to read a lot. I and I read a lot, both going on tech websites or news articles that talk about technology or specific domains that I'm interested in, again, like healthcare or civic tech, and understanding what's out there. I also I read the news. I read a lot of like pieces about the economy and how the people that I'm like people who are in the demographics potentially that I've worked with over time or that I'm designing for, researching, um, might be how they might be doing, and sort of just trying to understand more about the populations within which I'm working. Um, I there are certainly like Substacks that I subscribe to. There are a bunch of different ones around UX and technology and content design that I find very interesting. Um, but really just trying to get a sense of like what are the things that people are talking about, and then what's happening in the context of the greater world that might affect like how our users show up day to day and what they need and what might be influencing their work.
Great. So nine is about tools. Do you use both digital and analog tools?
Yeah, I do. So I mean, a lot of the tools that I use day to day are Workspace, Google Workspace products. I'm in design tools sometimes. I'm in survey tools sometimes. Sort of, I think a lot of your standard UX tools are part of my workflow. But and I mean, I work on a distributed team, so some of the people that I work with are here with me in New York, and others are all over the world. So I might be on digital video calls a lot of the time. But I am definitely a visual thinker. I draw a lot of diagrams. I find myself thinking best like when I can sort of narrate to myself either on a piece of paper or on a whiteboard. Um, I'm not doing much design work anymore, so I'm not really sketching things out for with the intent to turn them into like a digital interface. But I definitely like to storyboard and think through things. Um, I think that one thing, maybe pre-COVID, I was a lot more analog, partly because of the tools that were available at the time, and partly because I tend to be co-located with my team much more. But now that I'm working with such a distributed group, I think we necessarily need to turn a lot of what we do digital to make sure it's accessible.
Great. So halfway number 10, how do you deal with work life or life work balance?
That's really important to me, and I think it can be very hard. Um, I I've moved around a bit in my career, so I've lived in a couple different cities in different parts of the country. I've also had the privilege of traveling a lot for work, and I work with a large team in Europe, so sometimes I'm over there and I can be 8 or 9 miles ahead of, or sorry, 8 or 9 hours ahead of my team in California. So drawing those boundaries and making sure that I'm not like working until 8 o'clock at night if I'm here in New York, or 3 in the morning if I'm in Germany, has been really critical for me. I would say that practically speaking, I have a bunch of just practices I've developed over time for myself. One of them is delegating. So if a meeting is happening at a time that I know I'm not going to be available, either because it's outside of my standard working hours or just because I have a conflict or whatever, or I'm not working that day, um, figuring out like who should be there in front of instead of me. Do I need to be there? If I'm not there or somebody who can represent me isn't there, what's the worst that will happen? So I think just being ruthless about prioritizing my schedule and making sure that I'm really showing up and participating in the things that I need to be there for, and also looking for opportunities for my team or for other people to step up and own things, um, for the sake of their own careers, as well as making sure that I can be as scalable as possible. Another is I really encourage work-life balance and wellness, mental well-being with my team. I I'm sort of hesitant to say this on the record, but I generally believe that there are rarely UX emergencies. I won't say there are never, because anything can happen, but in a lot of the work that I do, there are things that certainly can be big deals, but if it doesn't get resolved at 2 in the morning, it's probably okay. So really trying to be mindful about when is something where we all need to drop everything and deal with it, and when is something we can come back to, or something that can be pushed to the next day. I also make time for my own interests, spend time with my family, spend time with hobbies. I do a lot of like silversmithing, and I'm an amateur jewelry maker. I belong to a community garden. Um, I do a lot of cat sitting, reading. So I really believe that like if I don't show up in good enough in a good enough state in terms of rest, well-being, mental health, then I can't be effective at my job. So I really prioritize making time for both.
Great. So 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
I think unsurprisingly, I would probably do a couple of things. So one of them is I mentioned a few hobbies. I've gotten really into like amateur jewelry making, and I like to spend time outside. So whether it's in the garden or bicycling, things that finding some way of integrating those interests into a career, um, or if I have the means, like just not have a career and do that instead. I really like working with people. I've thought a lot about whether some kind of teaching might be in my future. There are times in my life when I've thought about some going into some form of medicine. Obviously, that both teaching and medicine are massive commitments that generally require a lot of training. So it's not as simple as I would just do that tomorrow. But I think those are really great career paths that I would love to consider in the future, or love to have considered at some point in the past.
Okay, then what would you not like to do with your career?
That's a funny question. I won't say like there's well, okay, I can think of some things that I would never do, but I would say in general, I'm open to trying a lot of things. I think what really matters to me at the end of the day is making sure that there's a clear outcome of whatever work that I'm doing. So in the UX space, one thing that I take into consideration when I'm deciding whether or not to take on a project, or whether or not I think my team should work on something, is if we didn't do this project, what would be different? Or what is the impact of this work? And I want to make sure that the vast majority of the things that I'm contributing to will have some kind of tangible impact. Um, and we're not just doing it to check a box and say it was done. Obviously, there are times when that's going to happen, and that's fine. But I would look for work where I could usually point to something and say, yes, there's evidence of impact here.
Great. So 13, do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I I actually thought a lot about this one and what would be a good one to share. I think I'll, in the spirit of some of the things that I've been talking about, I'll go back to George Eliot, who once wrote that it's not too late to be what you might have been. Partly because I think that we're in a world where there are a lot of opportunities. The fields that we're in are changing quickly, and if there's something that you're interested in doing, there may well be opportunities to pick it up again in some new way.
Okay, 14. What's your least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Oh man. Um, I I really I really don't know. I will say that when I was in high school and I was just learning about linguistics, I had a side project. I don't remember where this came from, but I came up with like a bunch of words that people hated. Like I think people often say they don't like the word moist. So there are a bunch of other words like that, and I went around and like did polls to see which ones resonated the least with people. And I think the word fester stood out. So I'm not very fond of fester based on that experience.
Great. And you're choosing one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
Probably curious. That's probably cliche for a researcher, but I'm generally interested in hearing what people or things have to say.
Great. And what keeps you up at night?
A lot of things about the state of the world make me nervous, anxious, um, and sort of thinking about like what are the right ways to engage and help given a lot of the conflict and strife we see around us.
What's a dream you're chasing?
What dream am I chasing? I think I want to use my skill set, whether it, in whatever form it might take to help other people. Um, I think, and again, this may sound cliche, but like I'm very interested in thinking about like how can we use technology to solve ordinary problems that I think we all deal with or that many people deal with. And even if it's like not the most glamorous problem, how can we apply it in ways that will make a difference?
Great. And last few here. Number 18. What inspires you?
So, I mean, lots of things, but I think that one area in particular that has really come to inspire me, and I think if I could go back, I would probably tell myself to listen to this more. Um, Even though I don't come from academia, I mean, I have a college degree, but I didn't go to grad school, and in my field, a lot of people do. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of people in universities who are studying many of the things that I study professionally at a much deeper level, academically speaking. Um, and as I've spent time with them, I've just learned so much more about the topics that I think about on a daily basis and sort of the theories underpinning them. I also think that there are just so many interesting people in these spaces who have worked on all kinds of interesting combinations of things. So if I work on like the intersection of AI and design, there are people who are thinking about like AI to generate music or the intersection of music and design or lots of other things like that that I really don't encounter in the worlds that I work in, and learning from them has been fascinating and like such a joy.
Great. So 19. Any advice you'd like to share?
I think, I think I talked about this a little bit in my previous answer, but I would say that especially if you're an industry researcher um, or an industry UXer, like look at what's happening outside of the industry vertical that you're in. So whether that's you're working in consumer tech, see what's happening in enterprise. I think if you're a researcher in the industry and you don't have ties to academia, go read some papers, check out the ACM library. I think also just like I think also just reading, like in my case, I've learned a lot about what is UX like outside of like the Bay Area epicenter that I've spent so much of my career. Um, what are design trends, product trends in different countries? Why? What are the systems within which they're built? But I would say like stay curious about all these other places, and really think about like interrogate your own center of reference and why, and then see what you might learn from others.
Great. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you, and what's our call to action?
I would recommend, so first, I guess for tabs on me, I'm on LinkedIn. First initial, last name, no hyphen, or just type my name in. I have a website, which is for my first name, last name.com. Again, no hyphen. Sometimes my website does not have much on it, but sometimes I'll put links to things that I've done. Definitely say hi. I am not as organized as I would like to be, so it's okay to ping me more than once if I don't get back to you right away. If you're in New York, definitely love to have coffee with people coming through. I think my call to action for others is, once again, like whatever it is that you're doing, if you're a technologist, I would say, what are the ways that the work that you're doing that can be most useful to you and your community? Doesn't mean you have to abandon what you're doing and go do that. But I think just thinking about like how might you apply your skills, and what do people need, and what's the best way for that you could be useful to others in this time, I think is definitely something to consider.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining today. It's so great to connect with New York City again and everything that goes on there. Pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.